and Dan Rather in Washington.
The president is also nearing a showdown with China. Mr. Clinton has threatened to revoke China's trade privileges unless it shows significant progress on human rights by next month. The deadline is June 3rd, the 5th anniversary of the Mass for Freedom in Tiananmen Square. Connie Chung is in Beijing for this exclusive report.
Chinese Premier Peng has consistently held a firm line with President Clinton on the issue of human rights. Do not meddle in China's internal affairs. Today, in an exclusive interview, Peng strongly issued a new warning.
China, for its part, has never interfered in the internal affairs of other countries, and surely will not allow foreign countries, including strong countries like the United States, to interfere in the internal affairs of China.
U.S. relations with China have been strained since June of 1989, when hundreds, maybe thousands, died in Tiananmen Square.
The question of Chinese human rights.
President Clinton has threatened China with trade sanctions unless it respects human rights, and he has pledged to change the Bush record.
In China, the president continues to coddle aging rulers with undisguised contempt for democracy, for human rights.
But the Clinton administration's efforts to pressure China on human rights have so far failed miserably. Still, Chinese activists are urging Mr. Clinton not to give in.
Whenever I see pictures of the people killed in Tiananmen Square, I get very emotional.
They are pictures from Tiananmen, sons who lost fathers, mothers who lost daughters.
It tells that China is still ruled by a very cruel and brutal government. It is helpful if the U.S. can cancel fully or partially China's trading privileges.
But in Beijing, Premier Peng ignores all efforts to link trade with human rights. What do you see as the main problem?
There's no problem on the part of the Chinese side, but I hope that President Clinton will demonstrate the courage of statesmen and overcome these difficulties and make a wise decision.
China's leaders have refused to buckle to American pressure on human rights, but some say the Chinese have a different kind of freedom in this new China, economic freedom. There's a lot of money to be made, and everybody seems to want a piece of the action. 5 years ago, this luxury car showroom in Beijing would have been hard to imagine. Today, the manager can only see dollar signs in his future. And this young businesswoman is selling thousands of raincoats and jackets a year. What is more important, making money or politics?
Of course, making money. I think in here everybody thinks like me.
And all the new money is greasing the skids here for the political changes that the government has refused to allow. It's also changed the way dissident Peng views relations with the United States.
5 years ago, I supported trade sanctions because I thought it was the right response.
Today, Professor Peng has changed his mind, and dramatically. He opposes trade sanctions.
The middle class is emerging in China, and that middle class will become the leading force for political rights and freedom in the future.
The political pressure on President Clinton not to impose trade sanctions on China is even greater in the U.S. On the Seattle docks, for example, trade with China creates hundreds of jobs.
If they got some problems over there with their people, that's their problem. We got a lot of problems here, too. We need jobs, they need jobs.
And companies like Boeing say sanctions would hurt them, too. Boeing wants to keep selling all those planes to China.
The U.S. applying sanctions against China by itself will just leave the field open for Japan and the Europeans to move in and fill in the void, take business that otherwise should be the United States business.
So President Clinton is under extraordinary economic and political pressure here in Beijing and in the United States not to impose trade sanctions on China and to compromise on yet another campaign promise. He may be forced to propose limited, watered-down sanctions on Chinese government-produced products alone. Many experts say that may look good on paper, but would be largely ineffective and virtually meaningless. Connie Chung, CBS News in Tiananmen Square, Beijing.
Two weeks before the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, political tension is soaring again in China. June 3rd is also the deadline for President Clinton to decide on whether or not to renew China's trade privileges. But as Connie Chung reports from Beijing tonight, the Chinese government is sticking to a very hard line on human rights.
China's leaders detained another dissident today and managed to thumb their noses at the U.S., too. Wang Dong has already spent 3.5 years in prison for leading the student demonstrations in Tiananmen Square in 1989. He was taken into custody briefly today for speaking to the American news media. President Clinton is demanding human rights reform here. But just yesterday, Chinese Premier Peng said the president should not meddle in China's internal affairs. The detention today of Wang proves the premier really means business, but it also shows that he's ready to squelch any unrest as the 10th anniversary of Tiananmen Square approaches. The premier knows millions of people are dissatisfied with social conditions in China, and the last time they expressed their frustrations, Tiananmen Square exploded. They're upset about serious crime, up more than 20% last year. Drug arrests up more than 30%. Gang arrests up 55%. And they're convinced nobody's minding the store because many of the criminals are corrupt government officials.
It's a dog-eat-dog environment, and even if you're doing better than you were before, you feel that the system is going to pieces around you.
They also see inflation running out of control. Last year, how much were these vegetables? 20 cents, she told us. And now, how much is it? This year, 60 cents. And wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living. Some factories are doing well, like the steel mill the government wanted us to tour. But there are many state-owned mills like this one that are in jeopardy of going bankrupt and shutting down.
There's no social security system in this country. The pensions are all tied up into the companies. And so what's going to happen to those workers when they hit the streets?
And there are more people hitting the streets every day, peasants who commute into the big city, only to find that an increasingly capitalistic economy doesn't guarantee jobs for everyone.
People expected the state to take care of them. Now the state doesn't want to take care of them. There is a feeling by a lot of people that there are no more rules. They don't know who's in charge.
So a very nervous government keeps flexing its muscles, trying to drown out all dissent by arresting any dissidents who challenge its authority. Connie Chung, CBS News, Beijing.